There's been a couple questions that have come in through text. Keep throwing in my direction. Here's one of the first questions that popped up for me, Chandler, when I listened to your story, and I love the recap of your journey. And in the midst of the twist and turn of getting laid off, eventually you prayed this prayer: God, put me in a position where I'll have a positive influence on others. What are your prayers that you're praying today? And is it the same? Mm-hmm. And if it's the same, what are the different flavors that you're starting to see God leading you in? What are your prayers that you're praying today?
I have no doubt that I've been put in a position that I can have that influence on others. So that has happened. Now what does that actually look like? And the situations are all across the board, and we need wisdom for all of that. And it's one example of just, we had an employee who did something, I won't get into the details of it, but ended up actually breaking a law that we had to let him go. It wasn't we can't look the other way, this is actually what we have to do. And I told him going into the meeting before we had to get there, I said, we're going to go to this meeting and it's going to be hard. What I don't want you to forget is you can trust me and I'll be there for you after it's over, no matter how this all goes. Do you believe that? And he said, yeah, I do. So a couple days later, it led to him getting, we had to fire him, and I wasn't the person that had to deliver that news, but he had said repeatedly, it's over, I'm just going to go end my life. And that had gotten back to me, and didn't quite know what to do with that. It was the first time we really had an employee threaten suicide. And I was driving home 2 nights later, and the approach really came to me. I was like, he will listen. Let me try and reach out. I gave him an analogy using golf that he could relate to. He thought that, like most people do, that what I've done I can never get past. There will be no second chance. There will be, no grace that we talked about in hiring. Once we explain that that's not really the case, that's not really how this works, there will be plenty of other opportunities. Now let's get back into hope. I said, look, if you played a round of golf, like if you hit one out of bounds in the first hole and you three-putted it and you made an 8, that's tough. But would you just go, I made an 8, this round's totally shot, I walk off the golf course? No way. The only thing you have to do right now is go to the second tee and just try to hit the ball in the fairway. And let's just start there, one day at a time. And he reacted really well to it, and now he's moving on with his life, and he's really happy and doing what he's doing. And I think it's the journey with our employees and the people we come into contact with is not just a one-time thing. It extends long beyond, it's the welcome them as you come and bless them as they go mentality. I think that carries over so many things. So now I'm in this role, what does that actually look like? And how do you sustain that to where other people are seeing that too? So.
That's awesome. And I want to kind of explore a little bit more about kind of your grounding, but then ask a question that comes out of my interaction with you post-Ryder Cup. But I remember pre-Ryder Cup, this event, you invited myself and Joel and our wives to come over and spend some time with you, and you took us around. It was awesome, such a great night. And I just kind of felt like this feeling come over me, and I think it's out of the book of Ruth. It's a quote from the scriptures that I have been raised up for such a time as this. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about it that God was moving in that to bring you to that place of leadership. So for you personally, of that experience, big moment in a career, what was your personal favorite moment of the Ryder Cup week?
I would totally agree with what you're saying. It was like 3 weeks to go going into this thing. The scary thing about the Ryder Cup is that you're going to host this event, everyone's going to watch, but you also don't know if you're about to attend a wedding or a funeral. And I say that from an aspect of, we're Americans, we want the American team to win. And I had a really good relationship with our captain, Davis Love. He was the person that inspired me to start playing golf to begin with. And we were getting really close to the process, but if the United States doesn't win this thing, I'm going to look like an ex-girlfriend to Davis. Somebody like, oh, remember that time I was at Hazeltine and we lost the Ryder Cup? It's, hi, Davis. That's the hard thing. His recollection of when he captained 4 years ago in Chicago versus Minnesota are two different things. Let's just get that out there. So there was that uncertainty, but also so many things were coming into it that they were undeniable. I'm going to share one faith story here real quick. And I know I'm getting into storytelling time, and it's supposed to be like a 30-second reply, but let's just take the Ryder Cup out of it. I think what's really cool is how Davis Love came to golf. And I want to share this story real quick. How Davis Love came to Christ. Yeah, he's played golf for a long time. We had an event with Tom Lehman at Hazeltine back in August, and it was emceed by the guy who leads the Bible study on the PGA Tour. And we got storytelling, and he ended up in my office later, and he saw a picture of me and Davis Love from 2005 in my office, and he's like, "What's that?" So that's the first time I met him in 2005, and I went to tell him the story of all that, and I got the job at Hazeltine just after Davis's team lost, and so many things like this just doesn't happen. And Larry Moody's like, "Isn't it so cool? Like, none of this stuff is an accident." And he went on to share about Payne Stewart. If you follow golf, Payne Stewart was a really great player. He's not with us anymore. Payne Stewart won the 1991 U.S. Open at Hazeltine. And Payne Stewart's big knock on Christ followers was he used to say to Larry, he goes, "You know, Larry, what my problem is with the whole Jesus thing?" He goes, "No one ever thanks God when they lose." And Larry's like, "Yeah, they do, Payne." He goes, "No, they don't. Everyone loves God, want to win, thank God." And that was so Payne through the 80s. And then Payne won the 1991 U.S. Open at Hazeltine. And he won in a playoff over a player named Scott Simpson. Just two players, heads up on the last day. And they went into the press tent. Payne had won, Scott had lost. And Scott got up on the podium first. And he said something along the lines of, would I have loved to have won this tournament again? You bet. My name's already on the trophy. I would have loved to have won it again, but did I lose anything today? No. So I still have the love of my family and et cetera, but God is still the Lord of my life, win or lose today. And Larry Moody said that Payne Stewart was right in the front row waiting to go next, and he knew that Larry was right there, and he goes, and Larry's like, and he said that really shook Payne up, and it took Payne a few years to go, why is that guy so at peace after losing? I would have been so crushed. He goes, that's the thing, Payne. It's like his whole deal is not caught up in whether it was win or lose. Payne found Christ in his life in the mid-90s, and then Payne went on to lose the U.S. Open in 1998, come back the next year and make the putt at Pinehurst in 99. And I happened to be sitting in the grandstand to watch that putt with the guy who now leads College Golf Fellowship. But watching this, we didn't really know what we were seeing. Payne went on to be on the Ryder Cup team in 1999, later that year. And Payne was out there in the last match, had a real show of sportsmanship when the whole thing ended, and then we lost him 3 weeks later in a plane accident. His plane went up, lost pressure, small private plane, flew until it ran out of gas, and it crashed actually in South Dakota. And Payne was gone, and Larry said that's what started it for Davis. And there was actually a comment in Golf Magazine's Ryder Cup preview issue where Davis shares this. He says, we love Payne. Payne was so full of life, character, energy, and then he wins the U.S. Open. He was on our Ryder Cup team, and he was so content and at peace with his life, and then he was gone. And so that really shook up Davis because he didn't understand where that contentness and that peace came from until he started asking about it. And Davis found that, and he alluded to it. He goes, I'm so glad that I found the grace in that. And I grew up watching Davis, and I always admired him for how he played. And we got into it, and then we got into these situations, and I'm finding myself at these situations through the Ryder Cup where I was at a dinner with Davis and Jim Furyk and Davis's agent. We're sitting there at dinner. This was the night that Davis had to make three picks for his team, tough picks. And he had to call about 20 guys to say, we're not picking you right now. We still have one more to go. And we got through those things, and then we were talking about Stuart Sink's wife and breast cancer, and we're praying for her. I was like, this is what it's about. We're trying to win this thing, but we haven't lost the perspective of what's going on in life. That was a cool moment for me, is to realize that not only do I get to go through this experience with somebody that I've really looked up to for a while, but we now actually share this common view of life. And Davis gave the whole team Bibles. And what that tone was for this team, was so cool.
Yeah, that in and of itself is an incredible narrative for how he works and he lives his faith in his work.
Mm-hmm.
Going on the theme of peace, no matter what's going on around you, I remember The Sunday after the Ryder Cup was completed, I saw you here at Westwood. And we were talking, interacting a little bit. I think one of the things we talked about was today and you coming in to speak. And I asked you, how are you? Because one could argue that you had just gone through the apex moment of a head golf professional's career. It was an incredible week. Team USA won. There's all kinds of things. And then I've just heard something that I didn't know quite about you, that you have a sentimental part of you that attaches to moments like that.
Yeah.
When I asked you the question, you responded with these words. You said, I'm at complete peace. I don't think that's by accident. So could you talk a little bit about where did that peace come from? And how did you live in it, knowing that you had just exited just this incredible moment that you would want to attach to deeply?
Yeah, I think if we have to attach it to something, look, win, lose, or whatever was going to happen with the outcome of the Ryder Cup, I think I still would have felt the same. I would have been disappointed if they hadn't won, but still at peace. And we talked about earlier this summer with that whole message, it was like, what is our identity wrapped up in? Was my overall happiness wrapped up in how this was going to go? I loved how it went. That was great, but let's keep going on with life. So I think it has to do with what it's rooted in. I think that applies to everything. And you know, I saw a talk the other night which embodied everything that I felt about what's going on in our country this week, is that whatever goes on, I have a peace because we know who's on the throne. And we know who's overseeing all of this. You know, none of this, God predicted all of this. He is in control of everything. Nothing of this stuff is by accident. So is my peace wrapped up in who takes the oath to go into office? No. Like, that's that. There's something so much bigger than that, that I'm so at peace with everything. And then there's the other stuff. So I think those two things are connected, and you know, it's not about, again, what we accomplish. Is I was at peace about how we went through the process, and then the outcome was going to be the outcome. I've always said, like, the Ryder Cup was like a huge wedding in the fact that it takes months of planning. You can't control the weather. It's going to go by real fast, and you know, there's going to be a hangover after. But that is, I know I'll talk about the Ryder Cup for a long time. I'll be asked about it, but that is, again, it's not what defines us, as we talked about earlier.
That's right. And you very quickly turned the page to serving really well in your role, and we talked about that when you and I had lunch recently. But how are you turning the page? What's next for you, and how is your faith influencing how you serve now that that's behind you in your role at Hazeltine?
Yeah, we're just in the back of the room. I was talking about it with a few of you. The Ryder Cup is over, and that is done, and that's a check mark, and it's a chapter, and that's going to exist. I've had some initiatives that I think are worth discussing towards 2017 at my job and beyond that I'm now immediately getting right into. It's like starting a whole new campaign. And it's funny that it's happening this week because people are dealing with hurt from the difference of opinions of what's going on, and then I'm offering difference of opinion. And we had this conversation the other night, and it went okay. Things were put on the table, but bottom line is, one side was hurt because they were being led to believe that what they were doing wasn't in the best interest of others. And that hurt them. And they immediately want to withdraw from the whole thing, and I think they feel unappreciated. And it's on my docket to go into the office this afternoon and reach out to them and say, you know, if I need to apologize, then I will certainly apologize. And the outcome of this was not to have you feel that way, but I think we can get back at this and we can all find something we agree upon. So that is where we're going with it. We're still called to lead. I still believe I'm be given convictions on, we do need to talk about things because we need to always be doing the right thing, and that everyone can agree upon what that is, not just the 2% going, this is what we think is. That's the tough part about the job, but it doesn't mean that we recognize what's tough and then walk away from it. We recognize what's tough, which we still try to make it happen.
Here's a question that came in terms of representing faith with people. What's the biggest temptation you face or have faced at work with members or employees that have challenged your faith in Christ, if they have?
Well, that's interesting. My wife and I were identifying that where I work now, there's so many more Christians that I work alongside with. Versus, I think I would take it outside of the workplace, and I would actually say that in my industry, golf professionals. We're talking about people who work weekends, work a lot of Sundays because that's when golf gets played, work a lot of hours, really tough on marriage. I'm dealing with a lot of broken people that are dealing with divorces, addictions, alcohol, drugs, gambling. It's not pretty. And I think when I go and I interact with other PGA professionals, that is the challenge, is that I'm living my life in a dramatically different way than most people who do my job are. And that is where there is this, we're coming home from a tournament. Chandler, we're going to stop at the strip club. No, we're not really. And what does that conversation look like? So that is where I look at it and I go, we're so perfectly placed in where we are that if I hadn't been there, does anything change in the people around me?
It's kind of lightning round. We're going on to different subjects. Good question that came in. You mentioned that you, in your words, were a loner when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an introverted personality and enjoy time alone, do you find it challenging to manage people and stay engaged all day? How do you find strength to stay in the game?
Well, I think the important part of that is that I was a loner. I was very introverted. I think through programs like Young Life, they give us the confidence to come out and not be, so introverted. And in my position, I really can't be. Nor do I want to be. You asked me to do this, or Joel will speak like I'm very comfortable. And my wife was asking me, she's like, you weren't always like this. I said, no, I don't. I wasn't. Where did that come from? I think that's just the invitation of God to come live in your heart. And when people ask me about that, that is it. There's no other, I went to public speaking classes. I didn't go to a class to do that. I think that is purely just God in my heart. So when I recognize, and here's what I would say this. When I recognize it in others, this was a really cool God story, if I can segment and just share this real quick about this, because it is real. My first year at this club in Philadelphia, we went through caddy training. We bring on a bunch of high school kids that are all trying to find their confidence. Some have it, some don't. And the first year I sat in the meeting, we'll watch the kids, and there's a dozen of them, but one kid was kind of like the cowardly dog. It was kind of like you made eye contact, it was going immediately somewhere else. And it was like, all right, he doesn't have it, we got to help him find it. And the Holy Spirit, I just felt like, that one's yours. And whenever I went and played golf that summer, I said, give me Dan. Dan wasn't being assigned out because he couldn't even talk. It's part of the job. When you're caddying, you have to talk. So I was taking him, and I didn't need him to talk. I knew the golf course. I didn't need him to I just needed him to carry the bag. After 3 rounds, he said a few peeps. After 5, I got a few words out of him. The end of the summer, he was talking. I was patient with that. We let it happen. And I was like, I remember talking about it with my staff. I said, I can't figure this kid out. Why so introverted? Somebody came to me and goes, I know why. I figured it out. He watched his father get hit by lightning in front of his eyes when he was 10 and took him. I was like, that'll do it. There it is. Okay. All right, let's figure it out. Let's stay with it. His mother comes in that Christmas to buy some gifts for the kids. She comes up, introduces herself. Chandler, I don't know if you know who I am. I'm Dan's mother. And, oh, nice to meet you. Talking about a number of things. She says, you may not be aware, but Dan, we lost his father, 6 years ago or so. I said, I did hear that later this summer, and I'm so sorry. I imagine what that's been like, as a mother of 2 boys, and for him especially to have seen that. But I'm really glad that he's here, and I've gotten to spend some time with him. She says, well, I was really hoping you were here. I said, I want to thank you for that. You can't imagine what that's meant. I don't know if you knew that Dan's father was a caddy at Marion, which is where I was working. I said, I didn't know that. She goes, he used to caddy here on the weekends. He had a job, but he was caddying here. And actually, in the 1981 U.S. Open, he caddied here. And the player that he caddied for, his last name was Chandler. And she said, when we lost his dad, we had the caddy bib. And this is where the sentimental, we have the bib, and it says Chandler on the back. And we had it framed for him and put it in his bedroom, because that's what he wanted to be like his dad. And she's like, obviously, he's got challenges, and we weren't sure how this was going to go, if it was going to go at all. But you made it possible. That is the sign that we're in the right place, and that we can do some of God's work at our work, absolutely. We just have to be willing enough to recognize when the Spirit gives us the nudge. It happens all the time, GPs, right? When do those happen? How do we respond? And I love to respond as much as I can, and that's, again, the prayer is put me in that position, and also the prayer of recognizing when it's right in front of you.
That's great.
Yeah.
This is really meaningful. I'm going to call an audible and skip our table discussion so we can ask you 2 more questions, Chandler.
Yep.
So you talked about Chick-fil-A, you talked about tone that you saw, and you also talked about how you're aiming for that. You're in a leadership role, which entails that you're hiring people, you're bringing people onto your team that you want to represent what you are trying to set in terms of tone as a follower of Christ and all the things that you're trying to set. What are you looking for when you're looking for employees? That was one of the questions that came in.
That question's like so tailor-made, because I did leave something out of that conversation.
Like tailor-made golf club?
No,
Sorry, I had to,
golf club.
man.
Yeah. I left something out of the Chick-fil-A discussion I had with that manager. He goes, the only thing we're looking for in hiring is that people can make eye contact and smile. That's what they're hiring. He said people either can do that on their own or they can't. Some people find it different parts of life, but if they have that, we can coach the rest. But if they will look at you in the eye, and that's probably what I noticed first, like this person looking at me and smiling. And they either have that or they don't. So I was given a great, I'm going to share a quick story about, when I get asked questions, I tend to tell stories, so hopefully, again, if you got to take a break, get up, move around. At the end of my first year at Hazeltine, I had to make some changes. I had inherited a staff, and I felt like I had to make some changes. Some people needed something new in their life. Some people have found that sense, but there were some tough decisions. So I moved some people on, then I had to make some hiring decisions. And I got some great advice. Somebody said, don't hire what's best on paper. All you're looking for is an attitude. You're looking for people to follow your lead and do what's asked of them and work as a team. You're hiring an attitude. Whatever they don't know how to do, you're the one that knows how to do it. You coach them because you're a good coach. And I'm glad I heard that message. So I hired the guy who's going to be my right-hand man. And this guy takes the job. He's working in Florida. He's from Minnesota. He's 27, accepts the job. He's going to show up, in February and start. He calls me up in January and says, Chandler, I'm going through a really tough time right now. I've been offered a head professional job in Montana, and I'm thinking about taking it. I'm like, well, why are you interviewing for a job that you haven't even started the one that you committed to? Like, it was so, okay, all right, let's help you figure out your life right now, and let's actually, one would have been like, sorry, you committed to the job, you can't even think about that. That would have one way to go. I could have easily done that, he could have, yeah, you're right. What does Montana look like? Is this a good move? With this, we walked him through the whole decision, he decided to go. And that left me in a bad position. I'm going into year 2 where I've got to really deliver on what I said I would deliver on with what I'm going to hire, and I don't have my right-hand man 6 weeks before we lift the curtain. Okay, let's go back into the stack. Let's look at the resumes. There was a resume that I passed up on because on paper, he was an assistant pro in Ohio for 6 years. He'd been a head pro for 2 years, but then he came to Minnesota to take a way lesser job for seasonal. So when I looked at it on paper, I go, he got fired from the head pro job. Next. And I go through resumes, I get 100 of them that quickly. But he was at a local club, and I needed somebody local who could come over quickly. And I called this club, and I said, tell me about this guy. He says, most efficient guy ever. You'd be an idiot not to hire him. Send him over. So he walks in, and the first thing that nudged me was he was like 5'6". And I'm not discriminating against short people, but I think in my... I hired this guy, okay? Let me tell you how the story ends. But I'd had this perception of people who look like me and do things like me going into it. So that was the first, all right, let's talk here. And what I found out was, we got into the conversation. I said, take me through the progression here. How do you end up at this local club after the head pro job? So he said, well, I met my wife at that club. We had twin 1-year-old boys just recently. she's from Minnesota, I'm from Iowa. We always wanted to move back here. Why does it sound like jets are flying over?
No, it doesn't sound like it's like compressing in here.
All right.
30,000 feet, man.
So he says, we always wanted to get back to this area. And we weren't that satisfied with the job. She had a pharmaceutical job that far outweighed what I was making as the head pro at this club in Ohio. So we took the opportunity to move back. So one, he put himself, his job second to what was best for the family. I understood that. Okay, tell me about this seasonal job. It's February, you haven't been working since October. What have you been doing? I needed to understand, is this guy just kind of on the cruise ride? And he says, well, I've been working. I expected him to say unemployment, and I wouldn't have judged that, but I just wanted to know. And he says, well, I've been working, but it's not in golf, so I didn't put it on the paper. What have you been doing? He goes, I've been working for UPS. And I said, you've been delivering boxes this whole winter? And this was 2 winters ago. Remember how cold that winter was? So you've been out delivering boxes? He goes, I got a family, I gotta. And right in that moment, I learned that he's gonna do whatever it takes if he's doing that. He's gonna do the dirty jobs, he's gonna do whatever, and that is what our team needs to be successful. And I can't tell you how much respect I have. We just lost him to a head pro job. It's not a mistake. He moves on to be successful somewhere else immediately. And that in itself was, there are some managers would say, Ryder Cup year, what are you doing letting him go? And my other managers were like, you can't let this guy leave now. That's what's best for him. We'll be okay. And we are. We hired another great guy who just had the same values. But it wasn't always the capability. You know, we were looking for, what's the attitude? I think Chick-fil-A recognizes that, and I think anybody who does hiring, I would start with attitude first, and are they qualified, and are they capable?
That's awesome. It's the intangible things that you can't read on a paper.
Yeah.
And then I think the second thing that I've just heard you say is you want the best for your people. It's more important that they're in a good spot necessarily than it is to retain them and hold them on for our own purposes. Well, Chandler, I think we could go on for hours. I mean, hearing from you in terms of your perspective and the experiences that you've had, but we need to be done because it is noon and we've got things because it's Saturday. So, Chandler, I just want to say that I so appreciate what you brought here. Really appreciate the tenor in which you've done it, the vulnerability that you've even shown in the midst of it, and your journey and sharing your own personal edges of growth, as you've talked about. I think that is a really awesome edge, and you're serving well, and we're grateful for you. So can we thank Chandler Withington together for sharing?
Okay.